The people who sustain extraordinary output for decades without collapsing are not working less than you. They are not doing more yoga or taking better vacations. They've solved a different problem entirely. And if you keep burning out even after you rest, even after you try to recover, this video will show you exactly why that keeps happening. In this video, I'll show you number one, why burnout keeps returning even after rest, and what's actually causing the cycle at a physiological and psychological level. Number two, how a 3,000-year-old energy framework from Vedic philosophy maps almost perfectly onto modern nervous system science, and why that gives you a diagnostic tool no tip list can. Number three, the one identity level shift that stops the cycle at the root, not just the symptom, and how to make it practical starting today. Let's get into it. A woman in her mid 30s, a project manager at a tech company, told me something that stopped me cold. She said, I'm so sick of waking up at 5 a.m. and reading 10 books a month. These things have only made my mental health worse. She had done everything the productivity world told her to do. She had optimized her mornings, tracked her habits, set better boundaries, and she was more burned out at the end of that year than she had been at the beginning. She wasn't lazy, she wasn't weak, she was solving the wrong problem. That woman's story isn't unusual. Read through any comment section on a burnout video, and you'll find the same thing repeated in different words: feeling helpless, trapped, and defeated, loss of motivation, increasingly cynical, and negative outlook. People who have taken the vacation, people who have slept more, people who have followed every piece of advice the internet has to offer, and who are still waking up exhausted. So the question worth asking is not, how do I recover from burnout? But why doesn't recovery actually feel like recovery? The answer starts with understanding what burnout actually is at a physiological level. Your nervous system has two primary operating modes. You already know them even if you don't use these words. There's the sympathetic state, the one that runs when you're under pressure, pushing hard, meeting deadlines, chasing goals. And there's the parasympathetic state, the one that's supposed to run when you rest, when your body repairs itself, when your brain consolidates learning and resets its chemistry. Burnout is not simply running the sympathetic system too long. That's the surface description. The deeper problem is that most high achievers never actually switch states. They stop working, but they don't stop striving. They lie in bed, but they're running outcome simulations. They take a walk, but they're rehearsing tomorrow's meeting. The body is still, the nervous system is still running. The Vedic framework becomes useful at this point, not as philosophy, but as a diagnostic map. Sankhya philosophy, which underpins the Bhagavad Gita, describes three qualities of energy called the gunas. Rajas is the energy of motion, ambition, urgency, doing. Tamas is the energy of inertia, heaviness, withdrawal, numbness. Sattva is the energy of clarity, balance, engaged presence without frenetic effort. Burnout, described in this framework, is not a mystery, it's a predictable sequence. Chronic rajas, which is sustained, high urgency striving, collapses into tamas. The engine runs hot for too long and then it seizes. What most people call rest is actually tamas. The body stops, but the system is not restored. It's just stopped. That's why you can sleep 10 hours and wake up feeling like nothing has changed. Modern neuroscience describes the same sequence using different words. Researchers studying the default mode network, the brain's internal processing system that activates during rest, have found that genuine restoration requires a specific kind of mental state: non-striving, non-evaluative, open awareness, not sleep necessarily, not passive consumption, a quality of mind that is present but not grasping. The Gita calls that sattva. The research calls it parasympathetic dominance combined with default mode activation. They are pointing at the same thing. So, the reason rest isn't fixing you is that you're not actually resting. You're just pausing the external action while the internal engine keeps running at full speed. The practical takeaway from this section: the next time you try to recover, the question to ask is not, am I doing less? But has my nervous system actually changed states? You'll know the difference. Tamas feels heavy, numb, guilty. Sattva feels quiet, present, genuinely restored. If your rest feels like the first one, you haven't switched states yet. You've just stopped moving. Once you have the rajas, tamas, sattva model in your head, something interesting happens. You stop asking, "Why am I burned out?" and you start asking, "Where am I in the cycle right now?" That's a much more useful question because it has a specific answer. Let me make this concrete. Rajasic burnout looks like this. You're still going, still producing, still hitting deadlines, but everything feels urgent and slightly desperate. You can't stop thinking about work. You're irritable when interrupted. You feel like if you slow down, everything will fall apart. This is the high functioning burnout that nobody around you can see. Your coworkers don't believe you're burned out because you're still performing. But internally, the tank is almost empty and you're running on cortisol and anxiety. Tamasic burnout looks different. The collapse has already happened. Getting out of bed feels like lifting concrete. The cynicism has set in. The motivation is gone. You're not just tired of the work, you're tired of caring about the work. This is the stage where people start saying things like, "I feel helpless, trapped, and defeated." It's the stage that looks like depression because neurochemically it overlaps with depression significantly. Most burnout content treats both of these as the same problem and prescribes the same solutions. Sleep more, set boundaries, practice self care. But a Rajasic system and a Tamasic system need different interventions. If you're in Rajas, adding more productivity rituals, more 5 a.m. routines, more optimization is pouring fuel on a fire. The intervention you need is a genuine reduction of urgency, not just activity. That means changing your relationship to outcomes, which I'll get to in the next section. If you're in Tamas, the answer is not more rest. Tamas responds to gentle, structured activation, small commitments, short walks, returning to something that once gave you a sense of meaning, even for 20 minutes, not to produce anything, just to re engage the system. The Sattvic path, the restoration path, is not a destination you arrive at after enough self care. It's a quality of engagement you practice while doing the actual work of your life. The Gita is very specific about this. It doesn't say work less, it says work fully but release the anxious grip on what the work produces. Psychologists call this distinction process focus versus outcome focus, and the research on it is consistent and substantial. A 2014 study published in the Journal of Sport and Exercise Psychology found that athletes who focused on the quality of their performance rather than the result showed significantly lower anxiety and significantly higher sustained output over time. The Gita described that finding approximately 3,000 years earlier. The diagnostic question to sit with after this section: which state are you actually in right now? Not which state you think you should be in or which state you were in last month. Right now. Rajasic burnout, Tamasic collapse, or somewhere on the path towards Sattva. Your honest answer to that question determines what intervention will actually help you, and it's the question almost nobody in this space is helping you ask. This is the section that separates a temporary fix from an actual solution. Everything we've covered so far, the nervous system science, the Gunas framework, the diagnostic questions, those are tools. They help you manage the cycle better. But there's a deeper layer that the comment sections reveal when you read carefully enough. People write things like, "As somebody who has tried and failed for 4 years in community college and countless jobs, it's inspiring, but I'm not like y'all." Or, "I tell my coworkers I'm burned out, but they never truly believe me." What's underneath both of those statements is not a productivity problem. It's a meaning problem. It's the feeling that the effort and the identity are not aligned, that you're running hard in a direction that isn't actually yours. The Gita addresses this with a concept called Swadharma, which translates roughly as one's own nature and purpose. The text makes a striking claim. It says, "It is better to perform your own dharmu imperfectly than to perform someone else's dharma perfectly." That's not a spiritual platitude. That's a description of what happens when intrinsic motivation is present versus absent. Self-determination theory, developed by DC and Ryan at the University of Rochester, identifies autonomy, competence, and relatedness as the three core drivers of sustainable motivation. When those are present, people sustain effort without burning out. When they're absent, even successful performance leads to depletion. The research calls it controlled motivation versus autonomous motivation. The Gita calls it living someone else's dharmu versus your own. The Gita goes further than modern psychology on this point, and this is the part that most people miss. The text doesn't just say, find work you love and do that. It says the attachment to results is itself the source of suffering, regardless of what the work is. This is the doctrine of Nishkama Karma, action without attachment to outcomes, and it's almost always misread. Nishkama Karma does not mean indifference. It does not mean you stop caring whether your work is good. It means you bring your full attention and full effort to the action itself, and you release the anxious grip on whether that action produces the specific result you wanted. The anxious grip is the key phrase. Think about what actually burns you out. It's rarely the work itself. It's the constant mental overhead of tracking whether the work is going to produce the outcome you need it to produce, the monitoring, the catastrophizing, the gap between what you did and what you needed it to mean. That overhead runs continuously, even when you're not working, which is why rest doesn't restore you. You're still carrying the weight of the outcome. Nishkama karma is the practice of putting that weight down, not abandoning the goal, putting down the anxious surveillance of the gap between where you are and where you need to be. Practically, this looks like this. Before you start a significant task, you name the outcome you're working toward, you acknowledge it clearly, and then you deliberately redirect your attention to the next single action required, not the outcome, the action. When your mind pulls back to the outcome, which it will, you notice that pull without judgment and return to the action. This is not dissimilar to what sports psychologists call present moment focus and what mindfulness researchers call non elaborative awareness. The Gita frames it as a discipline, not a technique, something you practice across years, not something you do once before a big meeting. The identity shift underneath all of this is this: you stop defining yourself by the results your effort produces, and you start defining yourself by the quality of attention you bring to the effort itself. That shift is not passive, it's not resignation. It is, if anything, a more demanding standard because results are partly outside your control. The quality of your presence is entirely within it. And that's the thing that ends the cycle. Not better self care, not smarter scheduling, the recognition that the burnout was never about the volume of work. It was about the weight of outcome attachment you were carrying while doing it. That practice, redirecting from outcome surveillance to present action, sounds simple when I describe it, and it is genuinely difficult to install when the patterns run deep. If you have tried the process focus approach on your own and you keep sliding back into the anxious grip, or if you read through that diagnostic section and realize you're not sure whether you're Rajasic or Tamasic or somewhere in between, the fastest way through that is a real conversation, not a course, not another video. A conversation. I do free 30-minute consultations, no pitch, completely personal to your situation. You'll walk away with a clear diagnosis of where you actually are in the cycle and the specific next step that fits your life, not a generic framework. Whether we ever work together beyond that call or not, you leave with something concrete. The link to book is at dailymindreset.com consultation, and it's also in the description below. If this kind of depth is what you're looking for, subscribe, because this is what every video on this channel is built to do. One question before you go: when you try to rest, does it actually feel like rest, or does it feel like pause striving? Drop your honest answer below.